Hi, let me introduce Katharine Hayhoe. And Professor Katharine Hayhoe has joined us for a first part of a meeting to introduce her book, Saving Us, A Climate Scientist's Case for Hope and Healing in a Divided World, and tell us a little bit about what drove her to write it. Katharine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. I am honored to be the first introductory book of this club. And Paul and I were just chatting earlier, and he said he has over 200 people signed up for this book from 17 different countries, which is absolutely amazing. And in many ways, I think that this book is the perfect one to begin the book club with because it's all about how having conversations is the most important first thing that we can do. And that's exactly what you're doing here. So I'm not one of those people who writes a new book every year. Writing a book is a huge endeavor, and it took me about a year to write it and then another year to finish it off and get it published. But the reason why I wrote the book is because for several years now, wherever I went, whoever I was speaking to, I could be speaking at a university or a group of business people or the Rotary Club or a church or school children even. Whoever I was speaking to, I would see the same two questions coming up again and again. The two questions were, what gives you hope? And how do I have a conversation about this issue? It's so important to me. I'm so worried about it, but I can't figure out how to have a good conversation. It's just too depressing, or we get in an argument, or I just don't know why it matters and I don't want to go there. So the reason I wrote the book is because I couldn't find another book that answered those questions. And so now when people ask me, I have answers for them, but I can also say you can read the book or you can listen to the book as well, since there's an audio version. The book was written for people who are already concerned about climate change, which even where I live in the United States, 70% of people in the US are already worried about climate change. And that's in the US. I'm from Canada, where just under 80% are worried. In the UK, it's about just under 80% as well. In France, I think it's higher. It's about 86%. Around the whole world, about 85% of young people are worried about climate change. So most of us are already worried. But to go back to the US statistics, since we have the most of those, you've got 70% of people being worried, but 50% of people feel hopeless and helpless. They don't know where to start, and they're not activated. So we often think that the biggest problem we have is between people who do or don't accept the science. And we have those in Canada, in the United States, in the UK, in France, in Australia, and many other countries. We have those people. But it turns out that those people, that number is much smaller than the gap between people who are already worried about climate change and who are activated. That gap is twice as big. And that gap is much more important because we don't have to get people worried. They're already worried. We just have to help them know what to do. So that's why I wrote my book, is to help people know what to do. Because these days, if you are on Twitter, as Paul and I are, and many of you are too, you'll see so many people involved in the endless debate of, do individual actions matter most, or do system-wide actions matter most? And my answer to that debate is yes. Why? Because a system is made up of individuals. How does the system change if individuals don't work within the system to change it? So we as individuals have an essential role. In fact, the only way the system can change is by us as individuals engaging in every system that we're part of. And you might say, well, I'm not a prime minister or a president or a CEO or a big celebrity influencer, and I'm not either. I mean, sure, I might have more than the average followers on Twitter, but compared to a cat, my number of followers is like this. So we are all individuals, but we all are part of circles of influence. So I work at a university. I also work at a nonprofit. I'm part of a city. I'm part of a family. I'm part of social groups. I'm part of a church. I'm part of a network of people who do the same things that I do. Whoever we are, we're parts of circles that are greater than ourselves. And the biggest way that we can have an impact is not by focusing on our carbon footprint, as we're so often encouraged to do. Our carbon footprint would be our personal carbon emissions from what we eat and how we heat and cool our home and what we drive and how we travel. Now, don't get me wrong, our footprint is important, but what's much bigger than our footprint is our shadow. And how do we engage our shadow? By using our voice to advocate for change. So let me give you an example. We put solar panels on our roof. That's great. But if I use my voice to advocate for our university to transition to clean energy, the power of that change, which I can't do by myself, but I can join with others advocating for that, and the power of that change will be 1,000 times greater than my individual change. But why did it happen? It didn't happen because the president of the university decided they wanted to do it. It happened because students and faculty decided to advocate for those changes. So that's why we are so important as individuals, and that's how we can make such a big difference. And that actually answers the first question of how do we find hope, because we find hope in action. When we add our hands to that giant boulder and we look around beside us and we see how many other millions of hands are already on the giant boulder, and when we realize that giant boulder is not sitting at the bottom of an impossibly steep cliff with only Sir David Attenborough and Greta Thunberg trying to push it up, but rather that giant boulder is already at the top of the hill and it's already rolling down the hill in the right direction, and it already has millions of hands on it. And when you add yours and you encourage others to add theirs, we can see it going faster. That's what gives us hope. So that's my goal with the book, is to help people to feel encouraged and empowered and determined. And I haven't done any experiments where I've asked people before and after they read the book how they felt. But what I did do is when I gave a few book talks, when my book first came out this fall, I use this polling software called Poll Everywhere to interact with people when I'm giving virtual talks. And so I decided I was going to ask people to tell me how they felt about climate change in one word before the talk. So I said, in one word, how do you feel about climate change? And I used a Wordle format so they could just answer any question, any word that they wanted to. And then I said to them, after I gave in some cases, probably about a 25-minute talk on the main messages of the book, I said, now how do you feel about climate change in one word? And I collected their responses there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share 2 of those with you so you can see what the impact of the book is on people. And then I'd love to hear from you what your response was. Okay, so here's example number 1. And this was actually, I'm going to give you 2 examples. One is for a general audience who was part of a science festival in Utah. And the first one I'm going to show you is actually from a science writers conference. So these people answering are science writers who write, journalism articles about science on a regular basis. And up at the top, you have the wordle of how they responded before my talk. And at the bottom, you have how they responded after. And I'm sorry, Paul, but you're going to have to make me a co-host so I can share my screen.
Okay, let me see if I can do this.
Okay. I think if you just promote me to co-host, that should enable me to just share with you. Not happening yet.
So I was struggling to find you on the list.
Oh, yes. We have too long a list of people. That's a great problem to have.
I can make you host, I think. Let's try that.
All right.
Okay. When you leave, can you change it back to me, though?
Yes, I definitely can do that. Okay. I am the host now. All right. So here is what I was talking about. Before, people felt overwhelmed, scared, frustrated, stressed, hopeless, anxious, depressed. And again, these are science writers. And how did they feel after? And this is not after reading the book. This is just a 30-minute summary of the book. Hopeful, empowered, better, determined, better-ish. That's okay. It was just half an hour. Challenged and energized. And I love that. Now, let me give you the one for the general audience. It's slightly different, but sort of the same. Let me just scan down my Twitter feed here and find it for you with all the images that I've put up, some of which may be familiar to you. Just a second here. Where did it go? Oh, here's the other one. So general audience, scared, anxious, concerned, terrified, sad, defeated. And you know what? I love, excuse me, that the number one word here afterwards is determined. I love that. Determined, energized, empowered, motivated, ready. So that was my goal with writing the book. And I am just absolutely delighted, like I said, that you all chose this to be your first book. And I wanted to let you know something. And that is that if you want to go from this club and start a second club where you read the book with a larger circle of people who might not be climate people per se, I'm actually developing discussion questions, a short video to go with every section of the book. I'm developing class activities for people who want to use it in the classroom, and I'm developing an annotated reading list. So for example, I might refer to something in the book and I have a quote from somebody. Well, I'll have the full essay there on the reading list if you want to read the full essay, or if you want to dig deeper into a given subject. I was actually planning on having that all up on my website, which is just my name, katharinehayhoe.com. I'll put this in the chat here so you have it, http katharinehayhoe.com. I was planning on having that up on my website this week, but as you may know, COVID is running rampant through everyone and everything, and our entire family got it, as well as my TA and as well as my assistant and many of the other people who work with me. So that delayed things about a week. And I got the flu too on top of it. I had one of those COVID plus flu things, even though I'm triple vaccinated, and you still get some impacts from that. So that is going up on the website, though, by next week. And so if you want to take this book and use it anywhere else, if you want to use it in the classroom, if you want to start another discussion group with a group of non-climate people, if you want to use it in a club setting or a church setting or an organization setting, those resources are going to be on my website to make it as easy as possible for you. It's just going to be plug and play, because I truly believe that, as you know from the book, everybody has every reason they need to care about climate change. No matter who they are, no matter where they live, no matter what they care about, something that they care about, somebody, someplace, something is already being affected by climate change, and that makes them the perfect person to care. So I think everybody needs to be having these conversations, and I'm doing everything I can to help make my book a good tool to help you have those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katharine. I recognize that you've only got 15 minutes because I know you're busy heading off to a lecture, I believe, very shortly afterwards. But I think there's time for one question or two questions, perhaps. I'm going to two hands up. So let me go to Eric first. Eric McNulty, you had a question.
Actually, I had an applause, but since I've been called on, I'll come up with a question really quickly.
Sorry, I misrepresented the little symbols.
No, that's okay. I would love to know, what has been the most surprising thing you've heard as you've been out giving your book talks, as the book has been out in the world, in terms of response? What's been different than you expected it to be?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I was very very pleasantly surprised by how many people who are so embedded in climate action have been reading the book and telling me just how encouraged they were and how discouraged and depressed they were. I was hearing from somebody who is, a full-time climate activist, who said he started listening to my book on the train to COP in November. And he thought it was really interesting. And then he did, the crazy 16 straight days at COP. And then he listened to the rest of the book coming home. And he said he got on the train exhausted and kind of discouraged and just sort of feeling frustrated with all of, the arguments and the gridlocks. And he said by the time he got back down to London from Glasgow, listening to the rest of my book, he said he got off completely energized and completely restored and completely hopeful and just ready to go. And I was so amazed by hearing that, and so encouraged myself by hearing that, because we have to encourage each other. We can't do it by ourselves. And that's why connecting with each other is so important, because you can't do it individually. We can't do it as individuals. We have to do it as part of a greater whole. And so that's why I love that you are having this discussion online where we can see each other's faces and you're talking with each other about the book, because we're connecting with others and we can encourage each other through things that we know, things that we've heard, sharing that news. I'll share one more surprising response I got, and that was from a woman in France who originally messaged me and said, I've started to read your book and I live in a small town in France and I just don't think it's very relevant to me or my life, but I'm just reading the book anyways. And then she sent me another message and she's like, I can't believe it. I can see everything you're talking about. I see in people around me. That's exactly the way they think. And that's exactly what they're doing. and then she sent me a third message and she said, as a result of reading the book, I've decided to run for city council. And I just thought that was the best response. I just loved the way she progressed from, well, it sounds interesting, but it's not relevant, to, yes, this is exactly what's happening in a small village in France, to, I'm going to do something about it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming up with a fantastic question on the fly, Eric. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Katharine, if you could hand me back the controls.
Sure. Well, I'm willing to take one more question if somebody has one more.
Anybody else want a question? Raise a hand.
Quick question.
Can I?
Go for it.
Hi, Katharine. Love all your work and love all your tweets. I love the book, but I have one area that I find difficult, which is, and I do, so a few years ago, I decided to have conversations with everyone I met about climate change, and I have been doing that, and it is a struggle, and I'm very grateful for all the tips in the book. But the one response I find quite hard to counter, which I do get from quite a lot of people, often very educated, intelligent people, that, well, what does it matter? In a million years, there may be a new species will have evolved and we'll all be dead, but does that really matter? So they're kind of a hopelessness almost that makes them, they find that position easier to cope with than trying to do something about it. And I don't think I identified that type of response, particularly in the book, or I don't remember the counter to it, if you like.
Oh. Well, it is in there. And in fact, actually, I feel like the book is almost written to somebody who would feel that way. Because what you're referring to is a defense mechanism against a complete lack of efficacy. So as I talk about in the book, efficacy is sort of the fancy word for, if I do something, will it make a difference? And the problem we struggle with the most today in a world with almost 8 billion people in it is we all feel a massive, stunning lack of efficacy. We feel like we could do anything that we could dedicate our life to something and it wouldn't even be a drop in the bucket. And so our defense mechanism to that is, if we feel like there's nothing we can do, our defense mechanism is just, to be fatalistic. Like you just said, it's fatalism. Yeah. It's all going to end anyway.
In a sense, that's true, isn't it? If you take a long enough view, it doesn't matter. Like if the dinosaurs were having this conversation, if they were able to, they can't envisage our world, but they could say, well, that might be okay. There'll be just different species sort of around the place.
Well, that's definitely true.
Ahead.
That's definitely true. But the situation right now is there's massive, massive suffering right now.
Yeah, I know.
9 million people dying from air pollution every year. The poor getting poorer while the rich get richer. And if people really don't care about anybody or anything, then it's true. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. But if you care about anyone, if you care about anything, if you care about any place, then I think my answer to your question is really what the book is all about. Find out what they really do care about, what they're really passionate about. Connect the dots between climate change and what they most care about, whatever that is. And that's the first half of the coin. The second half of the coin is to show them something they can do that will engender a sense of efficacy. Because again, that fatalism is because they don't understand why it matters to them personally, and they don't understand what they can do about it. So the defense mechanism is to say, why does it matter?
Yeah.
And so really, yes, I do think the book is really very much about that. You just have to dig a little deeper to find what they care about and to show examples of how we really can make a difference.
Thanks. It's great.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Caroline, for a great question. And thank you again, Katharine. Brilliant. So the next activity we have, oh, sorry, I should let you say goodbye, sorry. You're very welcome to stay if you wanted to, of course. Oh.
Unfortunately, I can't, but I just made you the host again. So you're good. And thank you everybody for joining again. It's just great to see you all. Thank you for reading the book, and please do spread the word and use all of the resources that I have. And if there's any really interesting story that happens, send it to me via my website. I love to hear interesting stories related to the book or to conversations that you've had. And if there's a resource that I'm able to provide and I'm not, that would make it easier for you to do this, let me know. So, and if you're looking for a conversation starter, get something with the warming stripes on it. and just walk around with something with the warming stripes on it. And people will ask you what that is. And you can say, well, I'm so glad you asked. Let me tell you. So if you're struggling for a conversation starter, that's my number one tip. You can get it on a mask, right? You can get it on a scarf. You can get it on a tie. You can get anything you can imagine, even flip-flops, though you don't need flip-flops this time of year, with the warming stripes on it. And that's a good way to start a conversation. All right. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Excellent. So as I promised in my email that we'd be voting on the next book. So I'm just going to launch the poll.